Welcome to the Florida Gardener Podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer, and today is all about container design and selection. Containers are wonderful because no matter how small or large your space, you can have a potted plant. But they can also become a gardener's worst nightmare if not used properly. So when it comes to designing with containers, less is more and bigger is better. And I truly believe this is one of the main reasons some people think pots are high maintenance. They have a zillion tiny pots scattered in their yard or on their apartment balcony. Small pots have to be watered much more often than larger pots. They dry out so quickly. Larger pots obviously hold more soil, therefore also hold more moisture and for much longer. Bigger pots also look better. Think about when you have visited a high-end resort, restaurant, or even just flipped through a home and garden magazine. Chances are that staged mansion in the magazine showed two large planters flanking the entrance to the home. Another great example of this is Epcot's Flower and Garden Festival. The next time you go, pay attention to the size of the containers they use throughout the park. There is a reason they pop and look aesthetically pleasing at the same time. You're never going to visit one of these places and see 20 6-inch pots scattered around because A, they dry out very quickly, which means they require tons of attention, especially during a Florida summer, and B, it tends to look cluttered. Now, don't get me wrong, you can absolutely use tiny pots, and I've seen it done well, especially with cottage-themed gardens or when interior-scaping. But my general rule of thumb is to steer clear of them. My next design tip is when in doubt, don't select a loud pot. I prefer to let the plants be the star of the show. When you have a bright pot with lots of stuff going on, it takes away from the lush green foliage of that monstera leaf or the strikingly blue salvia flowers. It depends on the material of the pot and the style of your home, but I typically stick with black, gray, white, or neutral colors such as cream and tan. I also really love brown and earthy green. And of course, clay pots are always a safe bet. I typically don't use pots with designs or patterns. Now, I do appreciate some nice texture though. It doesn't have to be a smooth pot. Or maybe it has a nice ribbed lip. But that's about as adventurous as I will get. The next thing to keep in mind when designing with containers is repeat, repeat, repeat. Repeat the same plant-flower combinations throughout your space. The flowers in each container don't have to be styled the exact same way, but pick 3 to 5 different plants that you like that go well together and buy multiples of them. Don't go to the nursery and select 20 different random flowers. The same thing goes for containers. Repeat the same type throughout. If you have the budget, Pottery Barn has some gorgeous online collections. Home Depot and Lowe's are great, less expensive alternatives. The nice thing about them is you can return any unused pots. I like online delivery options because you don't have to worry about the logistics when it comes to getting the containers home, especially if they are large or heavy. Seeing the pots in person can be helpful though. You can always go to your local pottery store or Home Depot and bring some measuring tape just to get an idea of what will work in your space. When you get home, you can order them online. Or, of course, if you have a larger vehicle and some help, you can skip the online delivery and pick them up in person. And on that note, whether delivered or picked up, once your pots are home, always position the containers how you want them before taking off the stickers or placing soil inside, just in case you do need to make any returns. Now, when it comes to houseplants, maybe you don't want to repeat the same plants over and over again inside. I get that. Usually the plants we bring into our homes are unique specimens. Each one is special in its own way. So what you can do is use the exact same type of container throughout your house. This will help tie everything together. And if that is still too much, try using just the same color, style, or size of pot throughout. But either way, establishing some kind of cohesiveness will help create an interior scape that looks professionally styled. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention vertical planters. If you have a fence or a bare wall, outside or inside, I love the Wally Grow planters. There's no sponsorship or affiliation here, but these things are great. I've used them for jobs, and what makes them so nice is they are very easy to install, and the way they are designed prevents water from dripping down the back of the planter and onto your wall. The planters don't have any drainage holes at the bottom. Instead, they have a bunch of tiny holes on the front. You water it from the back though. I'm horrible at explaining this, but essentially there is a little back pocket where you water the plant, and the planter is designed to slowly let the water flow towards the front of the container. It's almost like a self-watering pot. The holes also help with airflow. Instead of the plant, quote unquote, being trapped with only 1 or 2 drainage holes, the entire front side of the container is pretty breathable. If you're even remotely interested, or you just have zero idea what I'm trying to explain, I suggest just giving them a quick Google. It's Wally Grow, Wally, Grow, Grow, and they sell a few different types of containers. The one I'm describing is specifically called the Eco Planter. Now let's discuss the thriller, filler, spiller method. So getting back to flower plant combinations, this is a great technique to use for making a bangin' container arrangement. You only need 3 different types of plants: a thriller, a filler, and a spiller. The thriller is a plant with height that adds drama and a vertical element to the arrangement. It could be a flowering plant such as salvia, a foliage plant such as canna lily, or even an ornamental grass. It's usually placed in the center of the arrangement. The filler is usually more rounded or mounded. It serves to make the container look full, and it's placed around the thriller. The filler could be dwarf pentas, sun patience, or even coleus. The spiller is any type of trailing plant or vine. They are placed close to the edge of the container so that they can hang over it. Creeping Jenny is great for full sun, and ivy or pothos is wonderful for shade. The best thing about the thriller, filler, spiller method is you can create a temporary arrangement, something that may need to be freshened up a few times during the year, or you can create a more permanent arrangement. Now, the next item I want to address is drainage holes. And do your pots really need them? My answer, it depends. There are different schools of thought on this, but here's what I can tell you based on personal experience. If it's a house plant, or if it's an outdoor container that's covered, maybe on a covered balcony or patio, no, you do not need drainage holes because you can control how much water you give the plant. The container is outside and not covered, so it receives water whenever it rains, then yes, you absolutely need drainage. Otherwise, that plant is going to become waterlogged. It will probably end up suffering from root rot, which happens when a plant stays wet for too long. Most plants need to dry out between waterings, and root rot is typically a death sentence for a plant. Now, for the record, you're probably just better off getting a pot with drainage holes either way, but I did want to clear the air on that because I do think that there are some misconceptions. And on that note, just a general rule of thumb with potted plants, it's always better to underwater than overwater. It's much easier to revive a thirsty plant than a drowning one. Speaking of proper drainage, I'm sure you've heard this one before, but make sure to use potting soil because potting soil is light and airy. The water will flow through no problem, whereas if you use garden soil in a container or sand from your yard, it's going to be very heavy, leading to poor drainage. Or worse, the water won't drain at all and it'll just sit at the top. A complaint I occasionally hear is soil leaching out of the base of the pot or water staining a patio or pool deck. Here are a few tips for that. Regarding soil leaching, this will happen no matter what, and you'll just need to top off the soil every once in a while with fresh potting mix. But there are ways to limit the amount of soil that comes out. You can use small mesh screens or netting. I've gotten this off Amazon, and you just place it over the drainage hole. So like inside the pot at the bottom before you add soil. Soil will still make its way out, but it should help lessen the amount of soil that leaches. You could also use a pot that doesn't have a drainage hole, but as discussed earlier, this only works for interior plants and covered patios, balconies, etc. The easiest way to prevent water staining on a deck or patio is to use a saucer. Most pots don't come with one, but there are tons of options on Amazon. I'm not sponsored by them either, I promise. You can find one that matches the style and color of your pot. I've even purchased large square saucers on Amazon. Another thing you can do to help with water staining is add some sand at the bottom. Yes, so literally just pour a few inches of sand. I recommend getting like clean sand. You can, purchase it. Don't just get it from your backyard. But anyway, you're going to add just a few inches of sand at the base of the pot before you add in the soil. This way the water filters through the sand and then comes out clear. Now, my last design tip is you can partially fill a large pot with packing peanuts or something similar so that you don't waste a bunch of soil. Now, if you're planting something that is going to need a lot of space or has deep roots, you don't want to do that. But if you're just planting some flowers, you certainly don't have to fill an entire 30-inch tall pot with soil. All right, so now let's move on to container selection. Just like plants, there are many types of pots and they all behave differently. You may have heard the saying, right plant, right place. Well, I also think there should be a saying, right pot, right place, because the type of pot you select totally impacts everything. Because this is the Florida Gardener podcast, we're not going to talk about frost-proof containers, but just know that if you are in an area that experiences a true winter, this is something you will want to look into for a pot, because you don't want it cracking in the middle of December. All right, moving on. So materials. The first one we're going to talk about is clay. Clay is very porous, which means it's going to dry out very quickly. But clay is very forgiving. So if you're someone that overwaters, or if it's a plant that doesn't need a ton of moisture, then it's a perfect pot. Another benefit of clay is it's said that they are better for healthy root development because they are so breathable. And keep in mind the size of the pot. You'll be able to get away with less frequent waterings with a 20-inch diameter clay pot versus a 6-inch diameter. On the complete opposite end, we have plastic and resin containers. These are going to be some of the least porous. If you're the person who forgets to water, or it's a plant that is okay with wet feet, then this pot is perfect. These containers are also great for spots that get lots of sun and stay warm because the soil will not dry out as quickly as a clay pot of the same size. If you go this route, just be mindful and opt for a high-quality resin pot so that it doesn't fade quickly. So now you understand that clay is on one end of the spectrum and plastic and resin are on the other. We are not going to do a deep dive into the rest, but just know that there are tons of other materials used to make containers, including stone, concrete, ceramic, fiberglass, and fiberstone. All of these fall somewhere between clay and plastic when it comes to porosity. The thickness of the pot also plays a part. Assuming all other things are equal, a thinner pot will dry out faster than a thicker pot. Something else to consider is the weight of the container. If you select a heavier container, it's going to be difficult to move. This may or may not be an issue for you, but it is something to be mindful of. And if you're using a lighter container, you may want to add a few pavers at the base so that it doesn't become too top heavy, especially during hurricane season. Pavers are really inexpensive. I use the 12x12 square concrete pavers. They are commonly used as stepping stones. You can find them at Home Depot or Lowe's for $1 or $2. I really like the flexibility a lighter pot provides. I can easily add weight to the base. Fiberglass and fiberstone both provide a very nice, elegant look, but are much lighter than a traditional stone or cement planter. All right, you guys, that wraps up episode 4 of The Florida Gardener. We will see you next week for episode 5. And in the meantime, if you'd like to download one of my Etsy garden templates or check out my social, you can access everything through my website, rootsredefined.com. That's roots, R-O-O-T-S, redefined, R-E-D-E-F-I-N-E-D.com. All right, thanks so much, and we'll see you again soon.